Hey guys, my name is Albert Ellison III. I'm a screenwriter, producer, and award-winning director. I'm currently in production and on set of my first feature film, The Profession. In the description below the video, you can find a link to my free screenplay guide, which is an outline of the first 10 lessons in this course and every fundamental element to screenwriting. These are worksheets you can fill out as we discuss the topics, so you might be able to retain the information better. It's my gift to you, so submit your email and you'll find the package in your inbox. Get your hands on the worksheet before we proceed into this episode. Today is going to be a little bit of a theory lesson as we look at some of the elements of a screenplay divided into two sections. First, we'll look at the fundamentals of structure and how to layer your story into a cohesive flowchart, and then we'll look at the formatting elements that go into actually writing the words onto the page of your screenplay. Part 1. The elements of structure. There's a hierarchical nature to the structure in writing. To achieve consistent momentum and change in your story, we need to look at 5 core elements of structure which all build up to each other in gradual succession. Before we move into the first section though, let us establish a prerequisite that every element of structure must be informed by the philosophical conflict. To do this, we must examine the conflict of the story and manifest it into what we call value. Values are variables that can flip from positive to negative or negative to positive through action in the story. These values could be what the characters believe, some goal they have, whether it's raining or not, whether something is now dead or alive, whether someone lies or is honest. Keep this idea of variable values that must constantly be in flux in your mind as we progress. It will help us reinforce the momentum and change of the story so we do not peter out and create a stale narrative. At the very bottom of the hierarchy of structure elements, the smallest of occurrences, we find beats. Beats are exchanges of action and reaction. These are the moment-to-moment interactions of the script. The goal of beats is to string a series of them together and escalate up to a change in a value. As an examination of beats in use, I'll take an excerpt from Story by Robert McKee, in which we get to witness the value of a relationship's stability being questioned. Quote, "As the alarm goes off, Chris teases Andy and reacts in kind. As they dress, teasing turns into sarcasm and they throw insults back and forth. Now, in the kitchen, Chris threatens Andy with, 'If I left you, baby, you'd be so miserable.' But he calls her bluff with, 'That's a misery I'd love.' In the garage, Chris, afraid she's losing him, begs Andy to stay, but he laughs and ridicules her plea. Finally, in the speeding car, Chris doubles her fist and punches Andy. A fight, a squeal of brakes. Andy jumps out with a bloody nose, slams the door, and shouts, 'It's over,' leaving her in a shock. There are 6 distinct actions and reactions in this section, 6 beats that compromise the escalation and change in value. First, teasing each other. Second, give and take insults. Third, threatening and daring each other. Fourth, pleading and ridiculing. Fifth, exchanges of violence. Sixth, Andy ends the relationship. At the beginning, the value of the relationship is positive. They are a couple. By the end, the value shifts to negative. That 6th beat is what we would call a turning point because it is the beat in a series where the value is changed. These beats help us seamlessly build up to a value change. Next in the hierarchy, we come to scenes. While beats are the individual elements that make up a greater moment, that moment in its entirety is what we call a scene. The accumulation of those 6 beats, ending with the turning point, is a complete scene. In every scene, a value must be changed, a point must be made. A scene is generally a collection of beats that spans over a continuous amount of time and in one location. There can, of course, be exceptions, but that is the general rule of thumb. A string of beats leads to a turning point of a value, which creates a scene. No scene is a scene without the flipping of a value. It will become quickly familiar how the hierarchy writes from here. Similar to beats leading into scenes, a collection of scenes will form a sequence. Generally, a sequence is a collection of 2 to 5 scenes which culminate into something more impactful than any individual scene alone. Often, a sequence will have a through line that will lead the selection of scenes to that satisfactory payoff. For instance, scene 1 in the sequence could be Harry's boss retiring so a new position in management opens up at his job. He files for the position. Scene 2 could show a rival for the position rise in ranks, whom Harry continues to take to the bar and tip him off, insisting he needs this position. When his rival takes the tip, the scene ends. Then, in scene 3, they come to promotion day and Harry wears his best tie for the imminent occasion. only to find his previous rival wearing a tie also. Harry, in rage over his waste of his $100 tip-off, attacks his rival publicly only to be fired from the company. This would be a collection of scenes making a sequence. Each scene has its own value change and is working a through line for the cohesion of a greater sequence. And then, the sequence ends on the most powerful value change yet, where Harry not only misses his promotion, but is terminated altogether. Looking back at the hierarchy, sequences stack into acts, which are the largest divisions in your story. The conclusion of each act should be marked by a massive reversal of values, even more powerful than any previous sequence or scene. The only remaining piece of the structure is a climax. A climax needs to come at the end of your final act, and it needs to be marked by an absolute and irreversible change in value, marking the final stance of your philosophical conflict. While that's a lot of theory, the key takeaway is that your story needs to be propelled by changes in values, which progressively leads up to the more dramatic and impactful changes, ultimately landing at an irreversible change which concludes the philosophical conflict of your story. It's an escalation of change and momentum in your story. Part 2. The elements of formatting. Now that we know how to lead the direction of the writing into a cohesive flowchart for your story, we need to learn how to actually format your screenplay correctly so your words can properly compel your narrative to life. I'll give you a live demonstration with Final Draft 11. The first thing we're going to do is establish the location our first scene is in. We need to do this with what's called a scene heading, or a slug line. These are used for context and scene division. The location is written first in a concise manner, usually followed by a dash and then the time of day. Sometimes they can be more elaborate. For instance, if the location is the interior of a car, you could add driving to this for further context. A good rule of thumb is to use a scene heading every time your story enters a new location. But sometimes, if you're bouncing between two places rapidly, it becomes tedious and overbearing, which is where a subheading comes in. You write subheadings like this. It's a cleaner way to show transitions when it happens within a single scene. Now that we've established our headings, we dive into the action. This is where we describe all the events of the story. You hit enter from your scene heading and it plops you straight into the action where you begin writing. Remember to write your action at the speed and pace you want it to happen in the film. We are not writing a novel. Next, these characters need to speak. Enter to start a new line and let's tab over. Here, it's asking us who is speaking. Let's input a name and hit enter. Now we enter the dialogue. When we're done here, we can hit enter to take us back to the action. When we need more dialogue, we hit tab again. We can enter a new character here or the same, which will continue to be suggested, and select a poll with an input of enter. Let's imagine that the film is just starting. We describe the action here, a landscape rolling by. Maybe you're wanting a character to have a voiceover during these rolling hills. We type in the dialogue, but how do we know it's a voiceover? That's where the extension comes in. After a character's name, you can enter VO. There will be some suggested options for the normal extensions. Now, if we want to display the title on screen, we can go back to the action and describe the title with the extension of OS for on screen. The next element we'll be looking at are parentheticals. These are used during dialogue to help express how the line should be read, things the characters are doing as they deliver the line, etc. It's to add an active extra dimension to the line. You hit the open parentheses to begin it. Here's an example. Finally, we come to transitions. Transitions are to help the writer move from scene to scene, and it helps express the context of what sort of transition it should have when it's time to shoot the film. It helps with intention, if you will. For instance, ending this action line with smash to has a much different connotation than dissolve to. Some common transitions are cut to, smash to, intercut, dissolve to, fade in, and fade out. Remember guys, you can get my free screenplay guide in the description below. Submit your email to receive that as we continue into this recap. Elements of a screenplay. Elements of structure. Story. The culmination of every element below. Climax. At the end of your final act must come an irreversible change which states the final point of your philosophical conflict. After the climax, there is no more conflict. The story ends. Acts. The biggest divisions in your story. Acts must be defined by a massive and irreversible change more powerful than anything previous to it. Sequences. A collection of 2 to 5 scenes with a shared through line which culminate in a more significant and impactful change than anything before it. Scenes. In every scene, a specific change must be made. This change must make a point about the philosophical conflict. Scenes are a collection of individual moments called beats that culminate in this change. Beats. Actions and reactions. There is a collection of beats in every scene that is building up to a specific change in the story. Elements of formatting. Using a proper screenplay software such as Final Draft will help you format your story correctly. Here are the elements within. Scene heading / slugline. A title card used for context and scene division. Interior or exterior. Location. Time of day. Example, interior, the shed, night. Subheading. Subheadings are a proclamation of location and time of day. They should be used when a change of location happens within the same scene. Action. Action is where you describe the actions of the story. Description and the action of the story. Margined left. Dialogue. Headed by the character name, you write the character underneath. It is centered in the script. Extensions. When dialogue is taking place, you can add extensions after the character's name to add a tweak to the delivery, such as VO for voiceover or OS for off-screen. Parentheticals. Within the dialogue, you can provide additional direction encased with parentheses. How you say the line, a specific action the character takes as they deliver the line, etc. Text within parentheses will not be spoken by the actor. Transitions. Notes to how the film will be presented. Often these are editing choices. Cut to, smash to, intercut, dissolve to, fade in, fade out, etc. These are margined right. Hopefully this episode helped you out with your screenwriting software. Next episode, we're actually going to be looking at how to write a scene, so come back next time. I'll see you then.